You're about to ruin everything. Not because you lack talent, not because your vision isn't real, but because you're going to tell someone about it. Right now, somewhere in your mind, there's a dream taking shape. Maybe it's a business, a transformation, a creative project, something that feels electric when you think about it alone at 3 in the morning. And your first instinct, the one that feels generous, excited, human, is to share it, to announce it, to post about it, to let the people closest to you know what you're building. That instinct will destroy you. Because every time you speak a dream out loud before it has roots, you're not sharing, you're bleeding. You're giving away the very fuel you need to make it real. You're trading potential energy for social validation. You're letting strangers and loved ones alike install doubt, judgment, and their own limitations into the fragile architecture of your beginning. The world doesn't reward announcers, it rewards finishers. And finishing requires something most people have forgotten how to access: the raw, relentless power of silence. This isn't about secrecy for secrecy's sake. It's not about being mysterious or performatively humble. This is about understanding one of the most brutal truths of human psychology and achievement. The moment you tell people what you're going to do, your brain experiences a hit of accomplishment without having done the work. Researchers call it social reality. When you speak a goal into existence and receive acknowledgement, even encouragement, you get a neurochemical reward. Dopamine floods in. Your brain tags that goal as partially complete. And your motivation to actually do it, it quietly dims. You feel productive. You feel seen. But you haven't moved an inch. Meanwhile, the person who said nothing is 6 months deep into execution. They're failing in private, learning in the shadows, building something real while you're still explaining your version 1 to people who will never understand it. This book is not for people who need permission. It's for the ones who are tired of starting over, tired of announcing launches that never happen, tired of feeling drained by conversations that should have fueled them. It's for the builders who are ready to go underground, to stop performing progress and start creating it, to embrace the most counterintuitive strategy for success in a world obsessed with visibility. Disappear until you're undeniable. Let's begin.
Chapter 1. The Announcement Trap. You've done it before. You had the idea. The one that made your chest tighten with possibility. You could see it clearly. The finish line, the transformation, the version of your life on the other side of this thing. And because it felt so real, so close, you told someone. Maybe it was your partner over dinner, maybe your best friend. Maybe you posted it in a moment of inspiration, hoping the accountability would lock you in. You said it out loud. I'm going to... And they smiled. They said, "That's amazing." Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they asked questions that sounded like support, but felt like suspicion. Either way, something shifted. That electric feeling you had, it flickered. The idea that was a fire became a presentation, and every time you talked about it after that, you weren't stoking the flame, you were describing it. You became a narrator of your own unrealized future. And then, quietly, it faded. Not all at once. You didn't decide to quit, you just got busy. Life happened. The motivation that seemed so permanent dissolved into distraction. And 6 months later, someone asks you about it and you give that sheepish half smile and say, "Yeah, I'm still working on that," knowing full well you're not. This is the announcement trap. And you didn't fall into it because you're weak. You fell into it because you're human. Because your brain doesn't distinguish between saying you'll do something and actually doing it. Not at first. When you announce a goal and people react, your mind interprets that social acknowledgement as progress. You get a taste of the reward without the suffering, the struggle, the uncertainty. Psychologist Peter Gollwitzer spent years studying this phenomenon. He found that when people talk about their goals, they're less likely to achieve them. Not because talking is bad, but because it satisfies the same psychological need that doing the work would. You rob yourself of hunger by feasting on attention. The people who win, the ones who actually finish, who show up one day with the thing everyone else only talked about, they understood something you didn't. They knew that silence is not emptiness. Silence is compression. It's the period before the explosion. It's where pressure builds, where focus sharpens, where your identity starts to shift from someone who has ideas to someone who executes them. When you stop talking about what you're going to do, you're forced to confront whether you're actually going to do it. There's no audience to perform for, no one to impress with your intention. It's just you and the work. And that's terrifying. Because intention is easy, execution is where you meet yourself. The announcement trap isn't just about other people's reactions, it's about yours. When you declare something publicly, you activate your ego. You become attached not to the goal, but to being seen as the person pursuing the goal. And the moment that happens, you're no longer building for yourself. You're building for spectators. You start making decisions based on optics instead of outcomes. You worry about what it will look like if you pivot, if you fail, if it takes longer than you said. You become a hostage to your own announcement. The truly dangerous part is you don't even realize it's happening. You think you're being strategic, transparent, accountable. But accountability to the wrong audience is just distraction dressed up as discipline. Real accountability is private. It's the promise you make to yourself when no one's listening, the standard you hold when there's no applause, the work you do on the days when no one asks how it's going. That's where giants are built. Not in the comments, not in the congratulations on your new venture. In the 4 a.m. hours when you're alone with your doubt and you choose to show up anyway. You don't owe anyone a preview. You don't need to justify your process or prove you're serious. The only proof that matters is the result, and results don't need an introduction. They arrive fully formed. Undeniable. The world is full of announcers. People with podcasts about the business they haven't started, posts about the body they're going to build, threads about the book they'll write someday. And beneath it all is the same hunger, to be seen as someone who does big things without having to do them first. But you're different now, because you're beginning to see the trap for what it is: a slow leak, a theft disguised as sharing. You're ready to reclaim your energy, to stop spending your momentum on explanations and start investing it in execution. The first step is simple. Stop talking. Not forever, not about everything, but about the thing that matters most. The goal that's still forming, the dream that doesn't have skin yet. Protect it the way you'd protect a newborn. Keep it close. Let it grow in the dark. Feed it with action, not words. And when the time comes, when it's real, when it's done, when it's undeniable, you won't need to announce anything. They'll see it. And they'll ask you how you did it. And you'll smile, because you'll know the truth they're not ready to hear. You did it by never telling them you were doing it.
Chapter 2. Why Your Dreams Die in Daylight. There's a reason why every ancient tradition, every mystery school, every master across time has honored the same principle. Sacred things grow in secret. Seeds don't announce themselves. They don't break soil and immediately explain their purpose to the sky. They stay hidden. They draw from darkness. They build root systems no one sees. And only when they're strong enough do they emerge. Your dreams work the same way. But we've been conditioned to believe the opposite. We live in the age of transparency, of personal branding, of document the journey. We've been sold the idea that visibility equals validity, that if you're not sharing it, it's not real. So we expose our seeds before they've even sprouted. We drag our fragile beginnings into the light and wonder why they wither. Here's what happens when you share a goal too early. You invite opinion into a space that requires only conviction. In the beginning, your dream is made of intuition. It doesn't have data yet. It doesn't have proof. It has a feeling, a pull, a knowing that doesn't make sense to anyone but you. That's exactly as it should be. But the moment you explain it to someone else, you step into their frame of reference. You start seeing your vision through their doubts, their limitations, their fears. Even the most supportive people can't help it. They filter your future through their past. And suddenly, you're defending something that shouldn't need defense. You're answering questions you haven't asked yourself. You're justifying timelines you never invited. Your dream becomes a committee project. And committee projects don't change the world. Picasso didn't poll his friends before he shattered perspective. Elon Musk didn't ask for permission to make electric cars cool or to launch rockets that land themselves. Oprah didn't take a vote before she bet everything on herself. They moved in silence until the work spoke, because they understood that creation is not a democracy. Your vision doesn't need consensus. It needs custody. And the only person qualified to protect it in its infancy is you. Let's talk about energy. Not the abstract kind, the real measurable force that drives action. Every time you talk about a goal, you expend energy. You burn calories, mental, emotional, creative. You simulate the experience of achievement through storytelling. And your nervous system can't tell the difference. When you describe the business you're going to build with enough color and conviction, your body releases the same neurochemicals it would if you'd actually made progress. You feel relief, satisfaction, a sense of completion. But nothing has been completed. You've just traded future momentum for present comfort. This is why so many people are incredible at talking about their goals and terrible at achieving them. They've become addicted to the feeling of intention, the high of the announcement, the micro fame of being the person with the plan. But intention without action is just fantasy with better PR. And the more you talk, the more you train yourself to be satisfied with the talking. You start to identify as someone who's working on something instead of someone who finishes things. And that identity shift is lethal, because identity dictates behavior. If you see yourself as someone who has big ideas, you'll keep having them and sharing them and wondering why none of them stick. But if you see yourself as someone who builds in silence and delivers in public, everything changes. You stop needing the validation of the journey. You start craving the satisfaction of the arrival. Here's the part that stings. Most of the people you tell won't believe in your dream the way you do. Not because they're bad people, not because they don't love you, but because they don't live inside your vision. They can't. It's not theirs. They'll ask logical questions about an illogical leap. They'll project their risk tolerance onto your recklessness. They'll remind you of all the times you started something and didn't finish. And they'll do it with care in their voice. That's the cruelest part. The doubt doesn't come dressed as an enemy. It comes dressed as concern, as realism, as someone who just wants to make sure you've thought it through. And if you're not careful, you'll internalize it. You'll start second-guessing the instinct that was clear before you spoke. You'll add contingency plans to something that required blind faith. You'll slow down to make others comfortable. And your dream will die in daylight, smothered by good intentions. There's a concept in psychology called social contagion. It's the idea that emotions, behaviors, and beliefs spread through groups like viruses. When you share a goal, you're not just sharing information, you're exposing yourself to the emotional frequency of everyone you tell. If they're skeptical, you absorb skepticism. If they're fearful, you inherit fear. If they're stuck, their stuckness attaches to you. You think you're seeking support, but what you're actually doing is averaging your belief with theirs. An average belief produces average results. The people who do extraordinary things don't average themselves. They isolate, they insulate, they protect the purity of their vision until it's strong enough to withstand the weight of the world's opinion. They build in private, they test in the dark, they refine in silence, and when they're ready, they reveal. Not to seek approval, but to claim what's already done. Think about the last time someone surprised you with a result, a transformation, a launch, a win you didn't see coming. How did it hit you? It stopped you in your tracks, didn't it? Because there was no buildup, no hype, no trail of breadcrumbs. Just a sudden, undeniable presence of something new. That's the power of the silent build. It doesn't negotiate for attention. It commands it. But when you announce early, you diffuse that power. You train people to expect updates, to track your progress, to become spectators instead of supporters. And spectators don't celebrate the same way believers do. Spectators wait to see if you'll fail. Believers are shocked when you succeed. You want to be surrounded by shock, not surveillance. So stop giving people real-time access to your unfinished work. Stop letting them watch you stumble. Stop offering commentary on a story that hasn't reached its climax. Let them wonder. Let them ask. Let them wait. And when you finally emerge, when the thing is done, when the transformation is complete, when the victory is undeniable, you won't have to convince anyone of anything. Your life will be the argument. Your results will be the testimony. And your silence will have been the strategy that made it all possible. The dreams that survive are the ones that stay underground long enough to develop roots. So bury yours deep. Tend to it in the dark. And when it's time, let it break through the surface so fast and so strong that no one can question whether it belongs.
Chapter 3. The Validation Economy. You're trading your future for likes. Not intentionally. You don't wake up and think, today I'll sacrifice my potential for a few encouraging comments. But that's exactly what's happening every time you post about what you're going to do instead of what you've already done. Welcome to the validation economy. It's a system so embedded in modern life that you don't even notice you're participating. But you are, every day. Every time you feel the urge to share a goal, document a decision, or announce an intention before it's materialized. Here's how it works. You have an idea. That idea creates tension, the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That tension is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. It's the fuel that drives action. But instead of using that fuel to move, you release it through announcement. You post, you tell, you share. And people respond. You got this. Can't wait to see it. So proud of you. And just like that, the tension dissolves. The discomfort eases. You feel seen, supported, validated. Your nervous system relaxes. But nothing has changed. You're still in the same place. The gap is still there. Only now, you've spent the emotional currency you needed to cross it. You've purchased comfort with your momentum. And the price is always higher than you think. The validation economy runs on a simple exchange. You give away your goals in their most vulnerable state, and in return, you receive social approval. It feels like support. It feels like fuel. But it's a loan, not a deposit, because that validation comes with interest. Now, you owe people updates,
progress reports, evidence that you're doing what you said you'd do. You've created an audience for a show that hasn't been written yet. And the pressure shifts. You're no longer working to satisfy your own standard. You're working to avoid disappointing strangers, to prove you weren't all talk, to justify the confidence people placed in you. Your internal mission becomes an external performance, and performance kills presence. You stop asking, "What does this need?" and start asking, "What will this look like?" You stop building for impact and start building for optics. You make decisions designed to generate content instead of results. You pivot when things get hard because you don't want to be seen struggling. You quit because the gap between your announcement and your reality becomes too embarrassing to sustain. And the saddest part? You think the problem is you. You think you lack discipline, follow-through, grit. But the truth is simpler. You're just playing the wrong game. The validation economy is designed to keep you dependent. Every hit of approval trains your brain to seek another. You become conditioned to need the response, the acknowledgement, the proof that what you're doing matters. But mattering and validation are not the same thing. Mattering is intrinsic. It's the alignment between your actions and your values. It's the integrity of showing up when no one's watching. It's the private knowledge that you're building something real. Validation is extrinsic. It's borrowed significance. It evaporates the moment the audience moves on. And they always move on, because the internet has the attention span of a goldfish on espresso. Today's announcement is tomorrow's forgotten scroll. The encouragement you received last week doesn't carry over to this week's doubt. You're starting from zero every single time. Unless you opt out. Unless you stop feeding the economy and start building your own reserves. Let's be clear. This isn't about rejecting all feedback or isolating yourself from community. There's a time and place for collaboration, mentorship, and support. But that time is not the beginning. In the beginning, your idea is too fragile for external input. It doesn't have structure yet. It hasn't been tested. It's pure potential, and potential is easily poisoned by premature exposure. Think of it like a Polaroid photograph. When you take the picture, the image is there, but it's not visible yet. It needs time in the dark to develop. If you expose it to light too early, the image distorts, gets overexposed, ruined. Your goals are the same. They need darkness to develop, silence to solidify, time to become something strong enough to withstand scrutiny. But we've been taught the opposite. We've been taught that sharing is caring, that transparency builds trust, that if you're not visible, you're not valid. These are the lies of the validation economy, and they keep you small. Here's what the people at the top know that you're just learning. Visibility is a tool, not a lifestyle. They don't share their process, they share their results. They don't announce their goals, they announce their victories. They don't build in public, they reveal in public. There's a massive difference. Building in public means exposing every iteration, every failure, every pivot. It means letting the crowd influence the creation. It means managing perception while trying to make progress. Revealing in public means showing up with something finished, polished, proven. It means controlling the narrative because you've already written the ending. One makes you a creator. The other makes you a content generator. And content generators are a dime a dozen. Creators are rare because they're willing to endure the isolation that excellence requires. You want to know why most people never finish anything? Because they're too busy reporting on it. They spend more time crafting the update than doing the work, more energy on the caption than the creation. more hours managing their image than building their skills. They become curators of aspiration instead of architects of achievement. And the validation economy loves this. Because as long as you're talking, you're not doing. And as long as you're not doing, you're not dangerous. You're just another voice in the noise, another dreamer who'll fade when the dopamine runs out. But you're reading this, which means you're waking up to the con. You're starting to see that every announcement is a leak. Every premature share is a withdrawal from your future self. You're realizing that the people cheering you on from the sidelines aren't the ones who'll be there at 2 a.m. when the doubt hits, when the work gets hard, when no one's watching and you have to decide if you're really about this or just about the idea of this. That decision can only be made in silence, because silence doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't perform. It just reflects what's real. And if you can't sit with your goal in silence, if you need to announce it to make it feel legitimate, then it's not solid yet. It's still a fantasy. And fantasies need audiences. Visions need execution. So here's the shift. Stop asking for permission through announcement. Stop seeking validation through sharing. Stop trading your power for applause. Start moving in the dark. Start building something so real that when you finally show it, people don't just say congratulations. They say, how did you do that? And you'll smile, because you'll know the answer they're not ready to hear. You did it by refusing to participate in the validation economy. You did it by betting on yourself when no one was watching. You did it by protecting your vision like it was sacred. Because it is. Chapter 4. Silence as Strategy. Silence isn't passive. It's not hiding. It's not fear. It's not insecurity dressed up as discretion. Silence is the most aggressive form of focus you can deploy. It's a refusal to dilute, a decision to compress, a commitment to let your energy accumulate instead of evaporate. And in a world that mistakes noise for productivity, silence is your unfair advantage. Because while everyone else is broadcasting their intentions, you're building infrastructure. While they're explaining, you're executing. While they're performing, you're progressing. And when the time comes to show what you've built, you won't need a spotlight. You'll be the light. But first, you have to understand what silence actually does. Neurologically, psychologically, strategically, silence is a force multiplier. Let's start with your brain. When you vocalize a goal, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning and decision-making, registers it as partially complete. You've taken a mental action. You've created a narrative. Your brain interprets that as progress. This triggers a small release of dopamine. You feel good, accomplished, motivated even. But here's the problem. You haven't actually done anything. You've just tricked your reward system into thinking you have. And now the drive to act decreases because your brain already got its hit. Why would it push you to do more when it's already been rewarded? This is called substitution. You've substituted real progress with symbolic progress. And your brain can't tell the difference, at least not immediately. But your life can. 6 months from now, your brain won't remember the announcement, but your reality will reflect the work you didn't do. Now contrast that with silence. When you commit to a goal silently, there's no dopamine release, no reward, no relief, just tension. That tension is uncomfortable. It sits with you. It nags. It demands resolution. And the only way to resolve it is through action. You can't talk your way out of it. You can't post your way past it. You have to move. That discomfort becomes rocket fuel. It drives you into the work because the work is the only thing that will make it stop. And every time you take action,
You get real dopamine, not the fake hit of social acknowledgement, but the earned reward of tangible progress. Your brain starts to associate silence with power, with momentum, with results. And you become addicted to finishing, not announcing. Silence also protects you from something most people don't even realize is happening: energetic theft. Every time you share a goal, you open yourself up to the projections, doubts, and limitations of others. Even well-meaning people carry their own baggage: their fears about money, their beliefs about what's possible, their past failures. And when you speak your dream into a room, those things attach. Not because anyone wants to harm you, but because energy is contagious. If you tell someone who's stuck that you're about to make a leap, their stuckness will try to pull you back. Not maliciously, just magnetically. If you tell someone who's risk-averse that you're betting everything, their fear will try to infect your clarity. You think you're sharing, but you're absorbing. And if you're not careful, you'll start to internalize narratives that were never yours. You'll begin to question what was clear, to hesitate where you were once certain, to add contingency plans to something that required faith. Silence protects the purity of your vision. It keeps your frequency clean. It ensures that the only voice influencing your decisions is the one that matters, yours. Let's talk strategy. In business, in war, in any competitive arena, the element of surprise is a weapon. If your competitors know what you're building, they can prepare. They can copy. They can position against you. But if you move in silence, you arrive before they even know you've left.
You disrupt while they're still planning. You dominate while they're still debating. This is why the most powerful moves are made quietly. Apple doesn't announce products years in advance. They build in secret, then reveal with precision. Amazon didn't tell the world it was going to dominate cloud computing. It just did it. Navy SEALs don't broadcast their missions. They execute under cover of darkness. Silence creates an advantage because it removes the opportunity for interference. No one can block a move they don't see coming. No one can talk you out of a decision they don't know you've made. No one can slow you down if they don't know you've started. You become inevitable because you're already in motion before anyone realizes the game has changed. Now, let's talk about relationships. Silence protects not just your goals, but your integrity. When you announce something and don't follow through, you erode trust. With others, yes, but more importantly, with yourself. Every unfinished declaration is a micro-betrayal. You told yourself you'd do it. You told others you'd do it. And then you did it. And your subconscious keeps score. It remembers every time you broke your word. And over time, it stops believing you. This is why serial announcers struggle to build momentum. Their internal credibility is bankrupt. But when you move in silence, every action is a deposit. You're not making promises, you're making progress. You're not managing expectations, you're exceeding them. And when you finally reveal what you've built, it's not just impressive to others, it's proof to yourself that you're someone who finishes. That self-trust is irreplaceable. It's the foundation of every great thing you'll ever do. Silence isn't about being mysterious for the sake of it. It's about refusing to spend energy you haven't earned yet. It's about honoring the gap between idea and execution. It's about protecting your most valuable resource, your attention, from the constant demands of explanation, justification, and performance. It's about understanding that your job isn't to make people believe in you. Your job is to believe in yourself so deeply that their doubt becomes irrelevant. And that belief isn't built through words. It's built through action, through showing up when no one's watching, through doing the work that no one will applaud, through staying the course when every external signal tells you to quit. That's where the real you is forged. Not in the announcement, in the silence after it. Not in the applause, in the hours no one sees.
not in the spotlight, in the dark, grinding, unglamorous work that transforms intention into reality. So stop talking. Start building. Let your life become so loud that your words become unnecessary. Let your results do the explaining. Let your transformation be the announcement. And when people ask you how you did it, when they wonder how you went from where you were to where you are without them noticing, just smile. Because they'll never understand that the secret wasn't a strategy, it was silence. And silence, when wielded correctly, is the most powerful strategy of all.
Chapter 5: The Invisible Ladder. There's a ladder you can't see. It's not made of wood or metal. It doesn't lean against anything visible. But it's there. And everyone who's ever built something meaningful has climbed it. The invisible ladder is the series of unglamorous steps between decision and arrival. Between, I'm going to do this, and I did it. Most people never make it past the first 3 rungs. Not because they're weak, not because they lack talent, but because they keep looking down to see if anyone's watching. And the moment you climb for an audience, you stop climbing for altitude. You start performing instead of ascending. You pause to wave, to explain, to prove you're making progress. And every pause costs you momentum. The invisible ladder doesn't reward spectators. It doesn't care about your follower count or how inspirational your captions are. It only responds to one thing: consistent, private action. The kind no one sees. The kind that doesn't photograph well. The kind that makes you question if it even matters because there's no immediate feedback, no validation, no applause. But here's what you need to understand. Every rung you climb in silence makes you stronger. Every hour you invest without announcement builds capacity. Every decision you make in the dark trains you to trust yourself over the crowd. And that self-trust, that's what carries you when the climb gets vertical. The invisible ladder has a peculiar quality. It only reveals the next rung when you fully committed to the current one. You can't see the whole path. You can't map it out in advance. You can't create a content calendar around your ascent. You can only take the step in front of you, and then the next one appears. This terrifies most people because we've been conditioned to need certainty, to require proof before we commit, to see the entire staircase before we take the first step. But the invisible ladder doesn't work that way. It demands faith, not religious faith, operational faith. The willingness to act without evidence, to build without blueprints, to climb without knowing how high it goes or what's at the top. That's the filter. That's what separates the people who achieve extraordinary things from the people who just talk about them. The talkers need to see the destination before they start. They need guarantees, testimonials, proof that someone like them has done it before. The climbers just start climbing. They don't need permission. They don't need a map. They need a direction and a decision. And they make that decision over and over again, in private, when doubt whispers that this is pointless. Let me tell you what happens on the invisible ladder that no one tells you about. You'll climb for weeks, maybe months, and feel like nothing's changing. You'll do the work, you'll show up, you'll execute, but the external world won't reflect it yet. Your bank account won't change. Your follower count won't spike. People won't suddenly start treating you differently. And you'll wonder if you're delusional, if you've wasted your time, if you should have just stayed where you were where at least things were predictable. This is the test. This is where most people jump off. Because they're climbing the invisible ladder, but measuring success with visible metrics. They're looking for evidence in the wrong dimension. But here's the truth. The invisible ladder builds you before it shows you. Every rung you climb is rewiring your nervous system, expanding your capacity, deepening your resilience, teaching you skills you didn't know you needed. You're not the same person who started climbing, but you won't realize that until much later. You won't see it until you're 10 rungs higher and you look back and barely recognize who you were. That transformation doesn't happen in public. It happens in the space between rungs, in the moment when you choose to keep going, even though no one would know if you stopped. That's where character is built. That's where legends are forged. Not in the highlight reel, in the hours that never make the documentary. The invisible ladder also teaches you something crucial: the difference between progress and performance. Progress is internal. It's skill acquisition. It's emotional regulation. It's the ability to do today what was impossible yesterday. Performance is external. It's perception management. It's curating an image. It's convincing others you're further along than you are. When you announce your goals, you shift from progress to performance. You start optimizing for optics instead of outcomes. You make decisions based on what will look good in the update, not what will move you forward. You avoid the messy, unglamorous work because it doesn't translate well to content. And slowly, subtly, you stop climbing. You just stand on the same rung, rotating to show different angles, hoping no one notices you haven't moved. But the invisible ladder doesn't lie. It doesn't care about your story. It only cares about your steps. And if you're not stepping, you're not ascending. There's a concept in physics called potential energy. It's the energy stored in an object because of its position. The higher you lift something, the more potential energy it has. When you release it, that potential converts to kinetic energy, movement, force, impact. Your silence is potential energy. Every day you work without announcing is another foot of elevation. Every skill you build in private is stored power. Every hour you invest without seeking validation is compression. And when you finally release it, when you reveal what you've built, when you step into the public eye with something undeniable, that potential energy converts. It becomes momentum, authority, presence. People feel it, even if they can't name it. There's a weight to someone who's done the invisible work, a gravity. They don't need to convince you of anything. They don't need to hype or hustle or perform. They just are. And that isness is magnetic. But it only comes from climbing the invisible ladder long enough to become someone different. You can't fake it. You can't shortcut it. You can't post your way to it. You have to climb. Here's what no one tells you about the top rungs. They're lonely. Not because you've isolated yourself, but because most people quit before they get there. They jumped off to chase something easier, something with faster feedback, something that felt more like progress because other people could see it. But you kept climbing, and now you're in rare air. The decisions you're making, the problems you're solving, the doubts you're facing, most people don't have reference points for them. You can't call a friend and ask for advice because they haven't been where you are. You can't crowdsource the answer because the crowd is still on the ground. This is where silence becomes non-negotiable. Because the higher you climb, the more opinions will try to pull you back down. People will project their ceilings onto your ascent. They'll tell you you've gone far enough, that you're risking too much, that you should be grateful for where you are. And they'll mean well. But they're speaking from their rung, not yours. And if you listen, you'll stop climbing. You'll plateau just below your potential because you let someone else's fear define your ceiling. The invisible ladder demands that you become immune to external definition, that you stop needing people to understand your choices, that you trust your internal compass more than their external observations. This isn't arrogance, it's sovereignty. It's the recognition that you're playing a different game now, operating at a different frequency, building toward a vision that doesn't make sense to anyone but you. And that's exactly as it should be. Because the things that changed the world never made sense at first. They only made sense in retrospect after the climb was complete, and everyone could see the view from the top. But you don't get that view by announcing every step. You get it by taking every step, by honoring the invisible ladder, by trusting that the work you're doing in the dark is the exact work required to become the person who can handle the light. So keep climbing, not for the audience, for the altitude, not for the applause, for the arrival, not to prove anything to anyone, but to discover what you're capable of when no one's watching. Because the invisible ladder isn't just a path to success, it's a path to self. And the version of you at the top, they're worth every silent step.
Chapter 6. When no one is watching. This is where you find out who you really are. Not in the moments when the camera's on, not when you're motivated by deadlines or accountability partners or the promise of recognition. But in the 6 a.m. hour, when your alarm goes off and your bed is warm and no one would know if you hit snooze. In the evening, when you're tired and the work is tedious and there's no one to impress. In the middle of the journey when the excitement has faded and the finish line is still invisible, and you have to decide if you're really about this. When no one's watching, that's where your character is revealed. And more importantly, that's where it's built. Because everything you do in private determines what you become in public. The discipline you practice when it's just you and the work, the standards you hold when there's no external pressure, the promises you keep to yourself when breaking them would be easier. These are the invisible deposits that create visible returns. But most people never make them. They save their effort for when it counts, when someone's paying attention, when there's a reason to perform. And then they wonder why their life feels performative, why they can't sustain momentum, why they're always starting over. It's because they never built a foundation in the dark. They built a stage, and stages collapse without an audience. But foundations? Foundations hold. Let's talk about what actually happens when no one's watching. You're faced with a choice: comfort or growth. No one's there to motivate you. No one's holding you accountable. No one will be disappointed if you choose the easier path. It's just you and the gap between who you are and who you want to become. And in that gap, you have to decide, do I close this gap or do I justify staying where I am? Most people justify. They tell themselves they'll start tomorrow, that they've earned a break, that missing one day won't matter. And they're right. One day doesn't matter. But it's never just one day. It's the pattern. It's the habit of choosing comfort over commitment when no external force demands otherwise. And that habit, repeated over weeks and months and years, doesn't just keep you where you are. It trains you to stay small, to wait for permission, to need pressure, to only perform when someone's watching. And that's a prison. Because external validation is unreliable. Audiences are fickle. Pressure comes and goes. But the work is constant. And if you can only do it when conditions are perfect, you'll never build anything that lasts. The people who win, who actually achieve the things they set out to achieve, they've mastered the art of showing up when no one cares. They've internalized a truth that most people never learn. Your private actions are more important than your public image. What you do when no one's looking
determines what you're capable of when everyone is. The discipline you build in silence becomes the foundation for performance under pressure. The habits you install in the dark become the systems that carry you when motivation fades. The integrity you practice with yourself becomes the character others recognize in you. You can't fake this. You can't post your way into it. You have to live it every single day in the moments that don't make the highlight reel. Think about the last time you made a promise to yourself. Maybe it was to work out, to write, to stop doing something that's holding you back, to start doing something that would move you forward. Did you keep it? Not just the first day, not just when you felt motivated, but on day 7, day 30, day 90.
When it got hard, when it got boring, when no one asked how it was going and you could have quietly let it die, did you keep it? If the answer is no, you're not alone. Most people don't. But if the answer is yes, you've tasted something most people never will: the power of private integrity. The unshakable confidence that comes from knowing you do what you say you'll do, even when no one's watching, even when there's no reward, even when it doesn't feel like it matters, because it does matter. It matters more than anything. Your relationship with yourself is the foundation of every other relationship, every achievement, every transformation. And that relationship is either built or broken in private. When you keep a promise to yourself that no one else knows about, you're sending a signal to your subconscious. I'm trustworthy. I'm reliable. I'm someone who finishes what they start. And your subconscious believes you. It starts to see you differently, to expect more from you, to support you in ways that feel almost magical. Opportunities appear, ideas flow, momentum builds. Not because the universe is rewarding you, but because you've become the kind of person who capitalizes on opportunities, executes on ideas, and sustains momentum. You've built the capacity in private that allows you to perform in public. But when you break those private promises, when you say you'll do something and then don't, and there's no one to hold you accountable, you're teaching yourself that your word doesn't matter, that commitment is optional, that you're only reliable when someone's watching. And your subconscious believes that too. It stops trusting you, stops supporting you, starts sabotaging you in subtle ways. You miss opportunities because you don't believe you'll follow through. You don't start projects because you know you won't finish. You stay stuck because some part of you knows you're not ready. Not because you lack skill, but because you lack self-trust. And self-trust can only be earned one way: by doing what you said you'd do when no one's watching, over and over again, until it's not a decision anymore, it's just who you are. Here's the part that changes everything. When no one's watching is exactly when it matters most. Because that's when you're training yourself for the moments when everyone is. The athlete who dominates in the championship didn't become great on game day. They became great in the early morning practices no one attended, in the extra reps after everyone else went home, in the discipline they practiced when their body screamed to stop and no one would have known if they did. The author who writes a bestseller didn't become a writer when they got the book deal. They became a writer in the years before, in the journals no one read, in the drafts no one saw, in the mornings they showed up to the blank page with nothing but discipline and doubt. The entrepreneur who builds an empire didn't become a leader when they got funding. They became a leader in the solo years, in the decisions they made when no one was there to validate them, in the risks they took when failure would have been private and easy to hide. What you do when no one's watching isn't preparation for the real thing. It is the real thing. It's the work that counts.
the work that builds you into someone capable of handling what's coming. So stop waiting for the stage. Stop saving your best effort for when it feels like it matters. It always matters. Every choice, every action, every moment you decide between comfort and growth, especially when no one's watching. Because those are the moments that define you, that build you, that transform you from someone who talks about what they're going to do into someone who simply does it. And when you finally emerge, when the work is done, when the goal is reached, when the world finally sees what you've been building, they won't know about the private battles, the early mornings, the late nights, the moments you chose discipline over comfort when no one would have known the difference. But you'll know, and that knowledge will be the foundation of everything you build next. Because once you've proven to yourself that you can be trusted when no one's watching, there's nothing you can't do.
Chapter 7. The Weight of Witnesses. There's a hidden tax on every goal you announce. It's not financial, it's not even obvious at first. But the moment you tell someone what you're building, you've added weight to the climb. Witnesses. And witnesses change everything. Not because they're malicious, not because they don't want you to succeed, but because their presence fundamentally alters your relationship with the work. You're no longer doing it for you. You're doing it for them. Or more accurately, you're doing it for the version of you that exists in their perception. And that version? It's not real. It's a projection, a story, a character you now have to maintain. And maintaining a character while trying to build something real is like running a marathon in a costume. It's possible, but it's exhausting. And it slows you down in ways you don't realize until you're miles behind where you should be. Here's what happens when you announce a goal. You create witnesses. People who now have expectations, opinions, investment in the narrative you've started. And whether you realize it or not, you start playing to those expectations. You make decisions based on what they'll think, not what the work requires. You avoid certain pivots because they'll look like failure. You force certain directions because you already told people that's where you're going. You perform consistency even when flexibility is what you need. The work becomes about managing their perception instead of serving the mission. And slowly, imperceptibly, you stop being the creator and become the PR person for a project that's dying from the inside. Because here's the brutal truth. Most witnesses don't actually want you to succeed. Not consciously. They're not sitting around hoping you fail. But unconsciously, they're invested in you staying relatable, staying within reach, staying someone they can understand. The moment you transcend, the moment you become something they can't relate to, you threaten the equilibrium of the relationship. You become a mirror for their own unrealized potential. And most people hate that mirror. So they'll subtly, unconsciously try to keep you in place. They'll ask questions designed to highlight risk. They'll share stories of people who tried and failed. They'll remind you of your past attempts, your limitations, your responsibilities. And they'll do it with love in their voice. That's the cruelest part. The weight of witnesses doesn't come dressed as opposition. It comes dressed as concern, as realism, as someone who just wants to make sure you've thought this through. And if you're not careful, you'll internalize it. You'll start to see the risks they see, to feel the doubts they project, to carry the limitations they assume. And your climb slows. Not because you're incapable, but because you're carrying their weight along with yours.
Let me tell you about a study done at Dominican University. Researchers studied goal achievement across different groups. One group kept their goals private, another wrote them down.
Another shared them with friends. The results? The people who kept their goals private and focused on action were significantly more likely to achieve them than those who shared. Not because sharing is inherently bad, but because it shifted the focus from doing to explaining, from execution to expectation management. The sharers spent energy maintaining the narrative, updating, justifying, defending. The silent ones just worked. And the work compounded while the sharers stayed stuck in the loop of performance. This is the weight of witnesses in action. Every person you tell is another stone in your pack, another voice in your head, another set of eyes you imagine watching your every move. And the more witnesses you have, the heavier the climb. Until eventually, you're not climbing at all. You're just standing there explaining to everyone why you haven't moved. There's a reason why monks take vows of silence, why athletes enter the zone and block out the crowd, why artists lock themselves away during the creative process. It's not about being antisocial or mysterious. It's about protecting the purity of the work. Because creation requires a kind of madness, a willingness to entertain ideas that don't make sense yet, to follow instincts that can't be justified, to make leaps that look reckless from the outside. But when you have witnesses, you can't afford that madness. You have to be reasonable, explainable, defensible. You have to make sense to people who aren't living inside your vision. And the moment you start optimizing for sense, you kill the magic. You edit before you create. You rationalize before you risk. You play it safe because safe is what makes sense to witnesses. But safe doesn't change anything. Safe doesn't build empires or create breakthroughs or transform lives. Safe just keeps you employed in the life you already have. And if you're reading this, that's not enough for you anymore. You want more, but more requires less. Less explanation, less justification, less witnesses, more silence, more focus, more faith in yourself over the approval of others. The most powerful people you've ever encountered share one quality. They don't need you to understand. They're not trying to bring you along on their journey. They're not seeking your validation or approval. They've made peace with being misunderstood, with being questioned, with walking a path that doesn't make sense to anyone but them. And that liberation, that's what gives them power. Because they're not carrying your weight. They're not managing your expectations. They're not performing for your comfort. They're just moving, fast, focused, unencumbered. And by the time you figure out what they're doing, it's already done. That's the advantage of no witnesses. You can move at the speed of your conviction instead of the speed of consensus. You can pivot without having to explain why. You can fail without it becoming a public spectacle. You can experiment, iterate, evolve, all without the performance anxiety that comes from being watched. And in that freedom, you move faster, you think clearer, you create better, because you're creating for the work, not for the witnesses. Now, I'm not saying you should never share, that you should become a hermit or cut off everyone in your life. There's a time for community, for collaboration, for bringing people into your vision. But that time is not now, not when the thing is fragile, not when you're still figuring it out, not when one discouraging word could derail your momentum. Right now, your job is to protect the work, to guard it like it's sacred, to create a fortress of silence around it so it can grow without interference. And that means being selective about who gets access. Not everyone deserves to be a witness to your becoming. Not everyone has earned the right to know what you're building. Some people need to be surprised by your arrival, not invited to your process. Because your process is messy, it's uncertain, it's full of doubt and false starts, and days when you question everything. And if you let witnesses into that, they'll either try to fix you, save you, or talk you out of it. None of those things help. What helps is you, alone with the work, figuring it out, making mistakes no one sees, building skills in private, Becoming someone new without having to announce the transformation. That's where the real growth happens. Not on the stage, in the wings, not in the light, in the dark, not with witnesses, in solitude. So release them. Release the need to be understood. Release the urge to bring people along. Release the expectation that anyone should validate your vision before it's complete. Your job isn't to make them believe. Your job is to build something so undeniable that belief becomes irrelevant. And when you finally emerge, when the work is done and the goal is reached, and you step into the light with what you've created, the witnesses won't matter anymore because you won't need them. You'll have become someone who doesn't require external validation to know their worth. Someone who's proven to themselves that they can commit to something in silence and see it through to completion. Someone who's built the unshakable foundation of self-trust that only comes from doing hard things when no one's watching. And that person, they don't carry the weight of witnesses. They carry the weight of their own excellence. And that's a weight that makes you stronger, not slower.
Love what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button and join our community of audiobook lovers. Your support helps us bring you more amazing stories.
Chapter 8. Build in the dark. Darkness is not your enemy. It's your studio, your laboratory, your sanctuary. It's the place where everything worth creating begins. In the dark, there's no pressure to be polished, no expectation to perform, no audience demanding to see progress before it's ready. There's just you, the raw materials of your vision, and the space to fail without consequence. This is where mastery is born, not in the reveal, not in the applause, but in the thousands of hours no one sees. The drafts that never leave your desk, the prototypes that don't work, the attempts that fall short. The dark is where you're allowed to be terrible on your way to being great. And if you skip this phase, if you try to build in the light, with witnesses, with an audience commenting on every iteration, you'll never develop the skills you need, because you'll be too busy managing perception to develop competence, too focused on looking good to get good, too afraid of judgment to take the risks that growth requires. The dark protects you from all of that. It gives you permission to suck, to experiment, to discover what works by exhausting what doesn't. And that discovery process? It's not pretty. It's not inspiring. It's not content. It's just work. Unglamorous, repetitive, often frustrating work. But it's the only work that matters. Because every master, every person who's ever created something that changed the game, spent years in the dark. Kobe Bryant shooting alone in the gym at 4 a.m. J.K. Rowling writing Harry Potter in cafes before anyone knew her name. Elon Musk teaching himself rocket science from textbooks while his critics laughed. They didn't document the dark years. They didn't post about the struggle. They just stayed in the dark until they'd built something that could withstand the light. And when they finally emerged, the world didn't see the failures. They saw the result. And they called it genius. But it wasn't genius. It was just what happens when you refuse to rush the process. When you honor the dark. When you build in private until you've created something undeniable. There's a concept in biology called metamorphosis. A caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly in public. It seals itself inside a chrysalis, completely hidden, completely vulnerable. And inside that darkness, something extraordinary happens. The caterpillar doesn't just grow wings. It dissolves. It breaks down into a kind of cellular soup. Its entire structure liquefies. And from that formless state, it reorganizes into something completely new. If you interrupted that process, if you cracked open the chrysalis to check on progress, you wouldn't find a butterfly. You'd find mush. And the caterpillar would die.
The darkness isn't optional. It's essential. It's the protected space where transformation happens. Your goals are the same. When you announce them early, when you expose them to light before they're ready, you're cracking open the chrysalis. You're interrupting the process. And what could have been a butterfly dies as mush. But when you protect the dark phase, when you seal yourself off and let the transformation happen without interference, you emerge as something unrecognizable. Not an improved version of what you were, something entirely new. And that's what stops people in their tracks. That's what makes them ask, how did you do that? Because they didn't see the dark. They only see the emergence. And emergence is always dramatic when the process was protected. Let's talk about what actually happens when you build in the dark. First, you face yourself. Without the distraction of an audience, without the dopamine of likes and comments, you're left alone with the work. And the work reveals everything. It shows you where you're disciplined and where you're lazy, where you're skilled and where you're pretending, where you're committed and where you're just interested. This is uncomfortable because most of us have built identities around potential, around being the person who could do X if they really tried. But in the dark, potential doesn't matter, only production. And if you're not producing, you can't hide behind the narrative anymore. You have to either step up or admit you're not serious. Most people quit here. They'd rather preserve the fantasy than face the reality. They'd rather keep talking about what they could do than discover what they actually will do. But you're different. You're willing to face yourself, to see the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are, and to close that gap one dark hour at a time. Second, you develop real skill. Not performative skill, not the ability to look competent. Real, deep, embodied mastery. The kind that only comes from repetition, from failure, from doing the thing badly 1,000 times until it becomes second nature. Malcolm Gladwell popularized the 10,000-hour rule, the idea that mastery requires roughly 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. But here's what people miss. Those hours have to be private. If you're performing while you're practicing, you're not actually practicing. You're rehearsing a performance. And there's a massive difference. Practice is where you push your limits, where you attempt things you can't do yet, where you fail repeatedly until you don't. Performance is where you showcase what you've already mastered. You can't do both at the same time. So the people who build in the dark, they're accumulating real hours, deep practice, focused repetition, skills that compound, while the people building in public are accumulating likes, followers, social proof, and wondering why they're not actually getting better. Third, you build psychological resilience. When you work in the dark, there's no one to rescue you from your doubt. No one to reassure you it's going to work out. No one to cheer you on when you hit a wall. You have to develop the capacity to self-soothe, to self-motivate, to keep going when every external signal says stop. And that capacity? It's the difference between people who finish and people who quit when it gets hard. Because it always gets hard. Every worthwhile goal has a phase where the initial excitement fades and the finish line is still invisible, and you're stuck in the messy middle with nothing but discipline to carry you. If you've been building in public, you'll quit here, because your audience will have moved on, the likes will have stopped, and without that external fuel, you'll have nothing left. But if you've been building in the dark, you'll have something they don't. The muscle of self-reliance, the ability to generate your own motivation, the resilience that comes from having already survived 100 dark nights alone. And that muscle,
will carry you. Fourth, you create space for innovation. In the dark, you're free to try things that might not work, to experiment without the fear of looking foolish, to break rules, test assumptions, follow hunches. This is where breakthroughs happen. Not in the polished execution, in the messy exploration. But you can only explore freely when no one's watching, when there's no reputation to protect, no brand to maintain, no audience expecting a certain standard. The dark gives you permission to be a beginner again, to not know, to discover. And discovery is the birthplace of everything original. Think about your favorite creators, your favorite innovators, the people whose work feels fresh and surprising. They all have one thing in common. They spent time in the dark. They didn't crowdsource their creativity. They didn't optimize for virality. They followed their curiosity into unknown territory and stayed there long enough to find something no one else had. And then they brought it to the light. Fully formed. Original. Undeniable. That's the gift of building in the dark. You're not iterating in public, letting the crowd shape your creation. You're iterating in private, letting your vision guide you. And what emerges is authentically yours, not a Frankenstein of feedback and compromise, but a pure expression of your capability. So embrace the dark. Don't rush it. Don't resent it. Don't try to skip it by building in public and hoping accountability will carry you. Accountability is useful, but only after you've built the foundation. Right now, you need isolation. You need the pressure of silence. You need the dark to do its work on you, to strip away the performance, to reveal the real you, to forge the skills and resilience and vision you'll need for what's coming. Because what's coming is the light. And the light is unforgiving. It exposes everything. Every weakness, every shortcut, every place you didn't do the work. But if you truly built in the dark, if you've put in the hours, faced yourself, developed real skill, and created something from a place of authentic vision, the light won't expose you. It will reveal you. And that revelation will be so powerful, so undeniable, that no one will question how you got here. They'll just be grateful you arrived.
Chapter 9. The Magician's Secret. Every great magician knows the cardinal rule: never reveal the trick. Not because they're trying to deceive you, but because the moment you see how it's done, the magic dies. The wonder evaporates. The impossible becomes mundane. And you can never experience that sense of awe again. Your goals work the same way. The magic isn't in the process, it's in the reveal. The power isn't in explaining how you're doing it, it's in showing what you've done. When you announce your goals, when you document every step, when you pull back the curtain before the show is over, you're not being transparent. You're killing the magic. You're reducing transformation to a checklist. Mystery to methodology, wonder to workflow. And in doing so, you rob both yourself and your audience of the most powerful moment, the reveal. Think about the last time someone genuinely surprised you with their transformation. Maybe they disappeared for a year and came back 50 pounds lighter. Maybe they quit their job and emerged 6 months later with a thriving business. Maybe they were struggling, then suddenly they weren't, and you had no idea what changed. How did that hit you? It stopped you cold, didn't it? Because there was no buildup, no warning, no gradual acclimation. Just the before and the after. And the gap between those two states felt miraculous. That's the magician's secret. The power is in the gap, in the space between impossible and done, in the mystery of how someone went from here to there without you seeing the journey. That mystery creates reverence. It makes people lean in, ask questions, want to learn from you. But when you show them every step, when you post about day 3 of your new routine, week 2 of your business launch, month 1 of your transformation, you've eliminated the gap. You've turned magic into math, and math doesn't inspire anyone. Here's what most people don't understand.
The process is for you. The result is for them. Your audience doesn't need to see you struggle. They need to see you succeed. They don't need a documentary. They need a demonstration. They don't need to know how hard it was. They need to know it's possible. And possibility is most powerfully communicated through arrival, not journey. When you show up transformed, when you present the finished product, the achieved goal, the completed mission, you're giving people permission to believe in their own magic. Because if you can do it, if you can cross that impossible gap, then maybe they can too. But when you show them every stumble along the way, when you normalize the struggle, the doubt, the days you almost quit, you're not inspiring them. You're confirming their fears. You're showing them all the reasons it's hard, all the places they might fail, all the evidence that this might not work out. And their subconscious collects that evidence like a prosecuting attorney building a case against your dreams. The magician understands this. They know that people don't come to the show to see the hours of practice, the failed attempts, the tricks that didn't work. They come to see the impossible made possible, to experience wonder, to have their sense of reality expanded. And that expansion only happens when the gap remains intact, when the how remains hidden until the what is undeniable. Let's talk about what you're actually protecting when you keep your process private. You're protecting your methodology, the specific combination of actions, decisions, and strategies that got you from A to B. In a world where everyone's sharing their blueprint and framework, the person who actually has one and keeps it private has a competitive advantage. Because while everyone else is giving away their secrets for likes, you're refining yours in silence. You're iterating without showing your competitors your hand. You're developing proprietary methods that can't be copied because no one knows they exist. And when you finally bring your result to market, to the world, to the public eye, it's protected. It's yours, and people will pay for access to what they couldn't reverse engineer from your Instagram stories. You're also protecting your energy. Every time you explain what you're doing, you're spending creative energy on narration instead of creation. You're using the fuel that should be powering your work to power your storytelling about the work. And there's only so much fuel. You can spend it building or you can spend it explaining, but you can't do both at full capacity. The magician knows this. That's why they practice in private. They refine in isolation. They perfect before they perform. Because performance requires a different kind of energy than practice. And if you're performing while you're practicing, you'll never develop the skill the performance requires. You'll be stuck in an endless loop of mediocre execution because you're dividing your energy between doing and documenting. But when you protect the process, when you pour all your energy into the work itself, you develop at 10 times the speed. You achieve at 10 times the depth. And when you finally reveal what you've built, it's not just good, it's masterful. Because you gave it everything instead of giving half to the work and half to the world. Now here's the paradox. The less you say during the process, the more people want to hear from you after. When you maintain mystery, you create curiosity. When you stay silent, you build intrigue. When you refuse to explain until it's done, you earn attention that can't be bought. Because in a world where everyone's oversharing, under-delivering, and constantly narrating their lives, the person who stays quiet and then shows up with something undeniable, they're magnetic. They break the pattern. They violate expectations. And that violation is what makes people pay attention. Think about Apple. They don't leak product details. They don't crowdsource features. They don't document the development process.
They build in absolute secrecy. And then when the product is perfect, when every detail has been refined, when the technology is ready, they hold an event. And the world stops, not because they've been teasing it for months, but because they haven't. The reveal has power because the process was protected. The magic works because the trick wasn't explained. Now contrast that with the entrepreneur who posts every day about the business they're building. Every pivot, every challenge, every small win.
They think they're building an audience, building anticipation. But what they're actually doing is diluting their impact. By the time they launch, everyone's already exhausted by the journey. There's no surprise, no excitement, no magic. Just another product from someone who's been talking about it for 6 months, and the launch falls flat. Not because the product is bad, but because the reveal was robbed of its power. The trick was explained before it was performed. So protect the trick. Guard it like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is. Your process, your unique combination of skills, decisions, failures, and breakthroughs is your intellectual property. It's what makes you different, what makes you valuable, what makes you irreplaceable. And if you give it away for free in real time, you're not being generous, you're being foolish. Because once the secret is out, you can't put it back. Once the magic is explained, you can't unexplain it. Once you've shown people how the trick is done, they'll never watch you the same way again. But if you keep it sacred, if you protect the process and only reveal the result, you maintain your power, you preserve the magic. You ensure that when you finally step into the light, it's with something that commands respect, attention, and awe. The magician's secret isn't just about keeping quiet. It's about understanding that mystery is a currency, that the unknown is more powerful than the explained, that people will always value what they can't easily access or understand. And right now, you're sitting on something valuable, a goal, a vision, a transformation in progress. Don't cheapen it by making it common. Don't dilute it by making it ordinary. Don't kill the magic by explaining the trick before it's perfected. Stay silent. Stay mysterious. Stay focused. And when the time comes, when the work is complete, when the transformation is undeniable, when you've built something that can't be ignored, step into the light. Not with an explanation, with a revelation. Not with a process, with a result. Not with a trick, with magic. And watch how the world responds. Because they've been watching magicians explain themselves for years. They're starving for someone who still knows how to create wonder. Be that person. Protect the secret. Preserve the magic. And let your reveal be so powerful that people don't ask how you did it. They just stand in awe that you did. Chapter 10. Momentum without applause. Momentum is a strange thing. Most people think it comes from external validation, from people cheering you on, from likes and comments and encouragement. But that's not momentum. That's motivation. And motivation is temporary. It spikes when someone notices, crashes when they don't, fluctuates with every opinion, every comparison, every change in the algorithm. Real momentum is internal. It's the compound effect of consistent action regardless of who's watching. It's the invisible force that builds when you show up every day, not because anyone's applauding, but because you committed to yourself. It's the quiet power that accumulates in silence and becomes unstoppable by the time anyone notices. And here's the truth that will change everything. You don't need applause to build momentum. You need repetition. Not the kind of repetition that performs for an audience. The kind that operates in the dark, away from feedback, beyond validation. The kind that says, I'm doing this whether you see it or not. That's where real momentum lives. In the space between action and recognition. In the gap between effort and reward. In the unsexy, unglamorous, unwitnessed work that no one celebrates, but everyone eventually respects. Because momentum compounds. Every rep you do in private adds to the next. Every hour you invest without announcement builds capacity for the next. Every day you show up when no one's watching strengthens the system that will carry you when everyone is. But this only works if you protect it from the need for applause. The moment you make your momentum dependent on external validation, you've introduced friction. Now you need the applause to keep going. You need the likes to feel productive. You need the comments to believe you're on the right track. And when they don't come, and they won't, not consistently, your momentum stalls. You slow down, second guess, start looking for proof that this is worth it. And in that pause, you lose the very thing that was building, the unstoppable force of daily commitment. Momentum without applause is the purest form of discipline. It's action without reward, progress without recognition, growth without glory. And it's the only kind of momentum that lasts, because it's not dependent on anyone else's energy. It runs on yours. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need proof that it's working. It just needs you to show up again and again and again, until the showing up becomes automatic, until the work becomes who you are, not what you do, until momentum isn't something you're trying to create. It's something you can't stop. Let's talk about what builds this kind of momentum. First, clarity. You can't build momentum toward a vague destination. Get in shape doesn't create momentum. A specific program does. Start a business doesn't create momentum. Registering your LLC and building your first offer does. Write a book doesn't create momentum. Writing 500 words every morning does. Clarity removes decision fatigue. It tells you exactly what the next action is, so you don't waste energy figuring it out every day. And that clarity has to be private, because the moment you announce it, you invite other people's versions of clarity into the equation. Their opinions on what you should do, how you should do it, why your approach might be wrong. And suddenly, your clear path becomes cluttered with external input. But in silence, clarity remains pure.
You know what you're building, you know the next step, and you take it. No debate, no discussion, just execution. Second, systems. Momentum isn't about motivation, it's about systems. A system is a set of repeatable actions that produce predictable results. You don't wake up every day and decide if you're going to brush your teeth. You just do it. It's a system. Your goals need the same treatment. If you want to build momentum without applause, you need to systemize the work. Make it non-negotiable, built into your day, as automatic as breathing. This is where most people fail. They rely on inspiration, on feeling ready, on being in the mood. And when those things don't show up, neither do they. But a system doesn't care about your mood. It runs, whether you're inspired or not, whether you're motivated or exhausted, whether anyone notices or not. And over time, the system creates results that motivation never could. Because systems compound, motivation doesn't. Third, detachment from outcome. This is the hardest part. Most people are so focused on the result that they can't sustain the process. They're checking for progress every day, weighing themselves every morning, tracking metrics obsessively. And when the results don't show up as fast as they want, they quit. But momentum doesn't work on your timeline. It works on physics. It takes time to accelerate, to overcome inertia, to shift from stillness to motion. And if you quit before the momentum kicks in, you'll never experience its power. You have to detach from the outcome and fall in love with the process. Not because the outcome doesn't matter, but because obsessing over it kills your ability to execute. When you're detached, you're free to show up fully, to do the work for its own sake, to trust that if you keep moving, the results will come. And they will. Not when you demand them, but when you've earned them through relentless, quiet consistency. Fourth, isolation. Not forever, not from everyone, but from the voices that slow you down, from the people who need you to explain your choices, from the environments that demand performance over progress. Momentum builds in isolation because isolation removes resistance. There's no one to impress, no one to convince, no one to update, just you and the work. And in that space, you move faster than you ever thought possible. You make decisions in hours that used to take weeks. You execute ideas that used to sit in your head for months.
You become prolific because you're no longer managing other people's perceptions. You're just building. And building without interference creates exponential momentum. Here's what happens when you master momentum without applause. You become dangerous. Not in a harmful way, in an unstoppable way, because you're no longer dependent on external conditions to perform. You don't need encouragement to work. You don't need recognition to keep going. You don't need proof to believe. You've internalized the entire engine. You've become self-sustaining. And that makes you a threat to everyone who's still waiting for permission, validation, or the perfect moment.
Because while they're waiting, you're moving. While they're talking, you're doing. While they're announcing, you're arriving. And when you finally emerge with what you've built, they won't understand how you did it, because they were measuring progress in applause, and you were measuring it in action. They were building for an audience, and you were building for a result. They were seeking validation, and you were creating value. There's a story about a sculptor who spent years creating a masterpiece in his private studio. People would ask him about it, offer to see it, try to get updates, but he refused. "It's not ready," he'd say. Years passed, people forgot about him, assumed he'd given up. But he hadn't. He was just building momentum without applause. Refining, iterating, perfecting. And one day, without announcement, he unveiled the sculpture, and it was so breathtaking that people wept. Critics called it the greatest work of the century. And everyone wanted to know, how did he do it? How did he sustain the effort for so long without any encouragement? His answer was simple. I didn't need encouragement. I needed to see if I could. That's the mindset. Not will they like this, but can I do this? Not what will people say, but what am I capable of? That shift from external to internal is where momentum stops being fragile and starts being unbreakable. So stop looking for applause. Stop checking for likes. Stop needing people to notice before you believe it's worth it. Build the momentum in the dark. Let it compound in silence. Trust that the force you're generating, invisible as it is real. And when the time comes, when the work is done and the goal is reached, you won't need to ask for applause. It will come, not because you demanded it, but because you earned it. Through every quiet morning, every lonely decision, every moment you chose the work over the recognition. That's the power of momentum without applause. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. It just needs to be built. And you're building it right now, in the silence.
Chapter 11. Let results speak first. There's a hierarchy to credibility. At the bottom, people who talk about what they're going to do. In the middle, people who talk about what they're doing. At the top, people who show what they've done. The difference between these levels isn't talent. It's not intelligence or resources or luck. It's restraint. The ability to keep your mouth shut until your hands have built something worth showing. Because in a world drowning in promises, results are the only language that can't be faked. You can fake enthusiasm, you can fake progress, you can fake commitment, but you can't fake a result. Either you did it or you didn't. Either it exists or it doesn't. Either you have something to show or you're still explaining why you don't. And the moment you show up with a real result, something tangible, undeniable, complete, every word you might have said becomes unnecessary. The result speaks. Louder than any caption, any announcement, any explanation. And the people who understand this, they live by a simple rule. Results first, recognition second. Always.
Let me tell you what happens when you violate this rule. When you speak before you've built, when you announce before you've achieved, when you prioritize the narrative over the result, you create a credibility deficit. Now you're in debt. You owe people proof that you're not all talk. Every day that passes without the promised result, the debt grows. People start to doubt, to disengage, to mentally file you under probably won't happen. And even if you eventually deliver, the result is diminished because it's not a surprise anymore. It's not a revelation. It's just confirmation that you finally did what you said you would. And confirmation doesn't inspire anyone. It just closes the loop on a promise that should never have been made publicly in the first place. But when you let results speak first, when you show up with the thing already done, already built, already proven, you create a credibility surplus. People don't just respect the result, they respect the restraint, the discipline it took to stay quiet, the confidence it took to work without validation, the integrity it took to finish before announcing. That combination, result plus restraint, is rare, and rarity commands attention. Think about the last time someone genuinely impressed you. Not with their words, with their work. They didn't tell you they were working on something, they just showed you what they'd created. And your first thought wasn't finally, it was wow. That's the power of results first. It transforms perception instantly. Because you're not asking people to believe in your potential, you're showing them your capability. You're not promising future value, you're delivering present value. You're not managing expectations, you're exceeding them. And in that moment, you've earned something that can't be manufactured. Authority. Not the kind you claim, the kind you demonstrate. The kind that doesn't need a title or a following or a personal brand. The kind that exists simply because you did something most people only talk about. Let's be clear about what a result actually is. It's not effort. It's not hours worked or sacrifices made or how hard you tried. Those things matter. They're essential, but they're not results. A result is an outcome, a finished product, a solved problem, a transformation completed. It's the thing you can point to and say, this exists because I made it exist. Not, I'm working on it. Not, it's almost done. Not, I'm really close. Done. The difference between working on something and finishing it is the difference between potential and proof. And the world has enough potential. It's starving for proof. For people who don't just start, who finish. For people who don't just dream, who deliver. For people who understand that the only thing that moves the needle is the result, not the story behind it. So if you're still in the middle of the work, here's what you do. Nothing. Not publicly anyway. You keep building. You keep refining. You keep showing up to the work. But you don't announce it. You don't update anyone. You don't create content around the journey. You just finish. And then, only then, you speak. Not about how hard it was, not about what you learned along the way. You simply present the result and let it do the talking. I built this. I achieved this. This is done. 3 words. No justification, no backstory, no plea for recognition. Just a result standing on its own merits. And if it's good, if it's real, if it's valuable, it won't need your words to prop it up. It will speak for itself. And people will listen. Here's what most people get wrong about sharing results. They think they need to explain the journey to make the result meaningful. They think people need to know how much they struggled, how many obstacles they overcame, how close they came to quitting. But that's ego talking. That's the part of you that wants credit not just for the result, but for the suffering. And while there's a time and place for storytelling, for sharing the lessons, the failures, the human experience behind the achievement, that time is not now. Now when you're introducing the result. Because when you lead with struggle, you diminish the result. You're essentially saying, look how hard this was for me. And people hear, this might be too hard for you. But when you lead with the result, when you show up confident, complete, unbothered, you're saying something completely different. This is possible. And possible is contagious. It gives people permission to believe in their own capacity, to think, if they can do it, maybe I can too. That's the gift of leading with results. You're not just showing what you did, you're expanding what others believe they can do. But only if you let the result speak first. Only if you resist the urge to soften it with explanations or caveats or the story of how you almost gave up. The result is enough, more than enough. Trust it. Now let's talk about timing. When do you reveal the result? Not when it's 80% done, not when it's good enough, not when you're excited and want to share, when it's complete, when you'd be proud to have it judged, when you've tested it, refined it, ensured it actually works. When it's so undeniable that criticism would say more about the critic than the creation. That's when you reveal, not a moment before. Because premature revelation is just another form of announcement. It's still seeking validation before the work is done. Still hoping for encouragement to carry you through the final stretch. Still making the result about you instead of the value it provides. But when you wait, when you honor the completion, when you respect the craft enough to finish it fully, the reveal has power. It lands differently. It hits harder. It creates a moment that people remember. Not because you hyped it, but because you didn't. Not because you built anticipation, but because you built something worth anticipating. And when that moment comes, when you finally step into the light with your completed work, you'll understand why silence was the strategy. Because the result will speak louder than anything you could have said along the way. It will validate every hour you worked in private, every temptation you resisted to announce early, every moment you chose progress over performance. The result will be the proof that you didn't need their encouragement to finish, that you didn't need their validation to know it was worth doing, that you are someone who completes what they start, whether anyone's watching or not. And that identity, that reality is worth more than any amount of applause during the process. Because applause fades, but results compound. They become the foundation for the next thing, and the next, and the next. Each one building on the credibility of the last. Each one reinforcing the pattern. This person finishes. This person delivers. This person lets their work do the talking. And over time, you won't need to announce anything. People just know. They'll watch. They'll wait. They'll expect. Not because you promised, but because you've proven. And when you show up with the next result, they won't be surprised that you did it. They'll only be amazed by what you did. That's the shift. From, I can't believe they actually did it, to, I can't believe what they did. From proving you're credible to demonstrating you're exceptional. From building trust to commanding respect. And it all starts with a simple commitment. Let results speak first. Not plans, not promises, not potential. Results. Real, tangible, undeniable. The kind that don't need a caption because they told their own story. The kind that don't need hype because they deliver value. The kind that don't need you to explain them because they explain you. So finish the work. Complete the mission, build the thing, and then, and only then, let the world see what you've done. Not what you're doing, not what you're planning to do,
what you've done, because that's the only thing that matters. That's the only thing that lasts. That's the only thing that turns noise into signal, potential into proof, and you into someone whose words carry weight because their work came first. Chapter 12. The Unveiling. There's a moment, singular, irreplaceable, when everything changes. Not when you start, not in the middle when the work is hard, but at the end, when you're ready to show the world what you've built. This is the unveiling. And if you've done everything right, if you've protected the work, built in silence, resisted the urge to announce early, this moment will be the most powerful experience of your journey. Because you're not explaining anymore. You're not justifying. You're not managing expectations or defending your choices. You're just revealing. And revelation, when it's been properly protected, has the force of lightning. It doesn't ask for attention, it commands it. It doesn't hope for a response, it guarantees one. Because you're not offering a promise or a preview, you're delivering a fully realized result. And the world stops for that. Let's talk about how to do this right. Because the unveiling is not the time to be humble. It's not the time to downplay what you created or cushion it with disclaimers. It's not the time to say, it's not perfect, but, or, I hope you like it. The unveiling is the time to own it, to stand behind your work with full confidence, to present it as what it is, the result of dedication, skill, and the courage to finish. You've earned this moment. You've paid for it with every silent hour, every private doubt you overcame, every temptation to announce early that you resisted. This is your moment to claim what's yours, not arrogantly, but unapologetically. Here's the structure of a powerful unveiling. First, context, not backstory. You don't need to tell people about your journey, not yet. What you need to give them is just enough context to understand what they're looking at. What problem does this solve? What value does it provide? Who is it for? Answer those questions clearly and concisely. Then get out of the way and let the results speak. People don't need your struggle to appreciate your success. They need clarity about what you've created and why it matters. Give them that and nothing more. Second, confidence, not hype. There's a difference between believing in your work and overselling it. Hype is insecurity dressed up as enthusiasm. It's trying to convince people something is valuable because you're not sure they'll see it on their own. Confidence is different. Confidence says, this is what I built. I believe in it. Here it is. No exaggeration, no superlatives, no desperate plea for validation. Just calm, clear ownership. And that confidence is magnetic. Because most people are so used to hype that when they encounter genuine confidence, it stops them in their tracks. Third, accessibility, not explanation. Make it easy for people to engage with your result. Not an easy in the sense of dumbing it down, easy in the sense of removing friction. If it's a product, make the purchase process seamless. If it's a transformation, show the before and after. If it's a creation, make it visible, tangible, experienceable. The unveiling is not the time to make people work to understand what you've done. It's the time to make it so clear, so compelling, so undeniable that they can't help but respond. Fourth, silence after the reveal. This is critical. Once you've unveiled, resist the urge to keep talking. Don't follow up with a post explaining the post. Don't anxiously check for reactions and adjust your messaging based on the first few responses. Don't start explaining what you meant or defending your choices. You've said what you needed to say. Now let it breathe. Let people process. Let them engage. Let them come to you with questions if they have them. But don't chase validation.
You've already done the work. The result is the validation. Everything else is just noise. Here's what happens during a proper unveiling. People are surprised, not because they didn't believe in you, but because they didn't see it coming. You weren't on their radar because you weren't posting about it. You weren't asking for feedback or sharing progress updates. You were just building, and now, suddenly, you're here with something finished. That surprise creates impact. It breaks through the noise of everyone else's announcements. It cuts through the fatigue of endless coming soon posts. It demands attention because it's rare, because most people talk forever and deliver never. But you did the opposite, and that reversal of expectations is what makes people stop scrolling, stop dismissing, stop assuming, and start paying attention. The unveiling also shifts your identity in the eyes of others. Before, you might have been potential, promise, someone who might do something someday. But after the unveiling, you're proven. You're no longer the person who talks about ideas. You're the person who executes them. And that shift is permanent. It changes how people see you, how they listen to you, how they engage with you. Because you've demonstrated the rarest quality in modern life, the ability to finish. And finishers are valuable. They're the ones who get opportunities, resources, trust. Because people know that if you say you'll do something, you will. Not because you're perfect, but because you've proven you're committed. And in a world full of starters, commitment is currency. Now let's talk about what you don't do during the unveiling. You don't apologize. For taking so long, for being quiet, for not sharing the journey. None of those things require an apology. You made a strategic choice to protect your work. That's not something to be sorry about. It's something to be proud of. You don't compare to others who've done similar things, to your previous work, to what you wish you'd created. Comparison dilutes impact. Your work stands on its own. Let it. You don't fish for compliments. What do you think? Is a question that undermines your confidence. It signals that you need external validation to believe in what you've created. But you don't. You believed in it enough to finish it. That's all the validation you need. If people want to share their thoughts, they will. But you're not asking. You're telling. And you don't overshare. The unveiling is not the time to dump every detail, every feature, every piece of the process. It's the time to create intrigue, to show just enough that people want to know more, to open the door without dragging them through the entire house. Let them explore. Let them discover. Let them ask. That engagement is more valuable than any explanation you could provide. Here's the truth about the unveiling. It's the reward for the silence, for every moment you wanted to share and didn't, for every time you felt invisible and kept building anyway, for every hour you worked without recognition. This is the payoff. Not in applause, though that may come, not in virality, though that's possible, but in the deep, unshakable satisfaction of having completed what you set out to do, of having honored the process, of having built something real while everyone else was building hype. That satisfaction, it's worth more than any amount of likes. Because it's yours. Earned, owned, undiluted by the need for external approval. And that feeling, that quiet pride in having done the thing when no one was watching, that's what transforms you. That's what makes you ready for the next level. Because now you know. You know you can commit to something in silence and see it through. You know you don't need an audience to stay disciplined. You know you're capable of more than you thought. And that knowledge changes everything. It shifts your ceiling. It expands your vision. It gives you permission to dream bigger because you've proven you can execute. The unveiling is not an ending. It's a beginning. The beginning of what's possible when you've mastered the art of building in private and revealing in power. So when your moment comes,
When the work is done and it's time to show the world, step into it fully. Not with nervousness or hesitation, but with the calm confidence of someone who knows they've earned this. Someone who kept their word to themselves. Someone who did the work whether anyone cared or not. And someone who's about to remind the world what happens when focus meets silence, and silence meets completion, and completion meets delight. The result is undeniable. The impact is immediate, and the unveiling becomes a moment no one forgets. Least of all you.
Chapter 13. Public Wins, Private Discipline. Everyone sees the trophy. No one sees the training. They see the launch, not the late nights. The celebration, not the sacrifice. The finish line, not the 1,000 miles before it. And that's exactly how it should be. Because the world doesn't need to see your discipline to benefit from your results. They don't need to witness your sacrifice to respect your success. They don't need access to your process to appreciate your product. What they need is the outcome, the win, the undeniable proof that you did what you said you'd do. And when they see it, when you show up with the win, polished and complete, they'll celebrate. They'll congratulate you. They'll ask how you did it. They'll want to be part of your story. But here's what you need to remember. That celebration is for the public win. The private discipline, that's sacred. That's yours. And it needs to stay that way. Because the moment you start sharing your discipline as content, you've turned fuel into performance. You've made the private public. And public discipline isn't discipline anymore. It's branding. Let's be clear about what discipline actually is. It's not posting about your morning routine. It's not sharing gym selfies with motivational quotes. It's not documenting your productivity system. Those things might inspire others. They might build a following. But they're not discipline. Discipline is what you do when no one's looking and there's no content to make from it. It's the choice you make at 5 a.m. when your alarm goes off and every part of you wants to stay in bed. It's the meal you don't eat because it doesn't serve your goal. It's the distraction you resist, the shortcut you don't take, the standard you hold even when it would be easier not to. That's discipline. And it operates best in darkness, because darkness removes the performance incentive. When no one's watching, you can't do it for likes, for recognition, for the validation of being seen as disciplined. You can only do it for the result. And that purity, that singular focus on outcome over optics, is what makes private discipline so powerful. It's uncorrupted by ego, undiluted by audience, uncompromised by the need to look good while doing it. It's just you and the standard you've set for yourself. And every time you meet that standard in private, you build something that can't be faked. Character. Not the character you perform on social media. The character that shows up when the camera's off, when the audience is gone, when no one would know if you cut corners. That character is the foundation of every public win. Because public wins are just the visible result of private discipline repeated over time. They're not miracles. They're not luck. They're not talent alone. They're the compound interest of 1,000 invisible choices. Choices to show up when you didn't feel like it. To do the work when it wasn't exciting. To maintain the standard when no one was measuring. And here's the part most people miss. The public win is smaller than the private discipline that created it. The trophy is a moment. The training was months. The launch is a day. The building was years. The celebration is hours. The sacrifice was daily. The win is what people see, but the discipline is what you become. And becoming is more valuable than winning.
Because wins can be taken away, lost, forgotten. But who you become through discipline, that's permanent. It's a shift in identity that no one can reverse. You're no longer someone who hopes to be disciplined. You're someone who is. Not because you say so, but because you've proven it to yourself 1,000 times in private. And that proof creates an unshakable foundation for everything you build next. Think about the people you most admire. The ones who consistently perform at a high level. The ones who seem to have endless capacity. The ones who deliver results that seem impossible to everyone else. Do they post about their discipline? Some might, but that's not where their power comes from. Their power comes from the 95% of their discipline that you never see. The habits they've installed so deeply that they're automatic. The standards they hold that don't require willpower anymore. The systems they've built that run whether they're motivated or not. That's the discipline that creates public wins. Not the performative kind, the operational kind. The kind that doesn't need an audience because it's not about being seen. It's about becoming capable. And capability, built in private, reveals itself in public through results. Here's what happens when you make discipline public. You start optimizing for appearance instead of effectiveness. You choose the workout that looks hard over the one that works. You create the morning routine that makes good content over the one that actually moves you forward. You perform discipline instead of practicing it. And performance always sacrifices depth for visibility. You can't go as deep when you're worried about how it looks. You can't be as focused when you're simultaneously documenting. You can't access flow state when you're thinking about the caption. So you stay surface level, you get the aesthetic of discipline without the substance, and over time, you start to believe your own performance. You think you're disciplined because you look disciplined. But when the real test comes, when no one's watching and the work is hard and there's no content to make, you fold. Because you never built real discipline. You built the image of it. And images don't hold weight. Private discipline also protects you from a dangerous trap, the comparison game. When your discipline is private, you're only competing with yourself, yesterday's version, last month's capacity, your own potential. That's a winnable game. But when you make your discipline public, you're now in competition with everyone else's highlight reel. You see someone else's morning routine and suddenly yours doesn't feel impressive. You see someone else's workout and suddenly yours feels inadequate. You see someone else's productivity and suddenly you're not doing enough. And in that comparison, you lose the plot. You stop asking, am I better than I was yesterday? And start asking, am I better than them? That question will destroy you. Because there will always be someone who wakes up earlier, works out harder, produces more. And if your discipline is tied to comparison, you'll never feel disciplined enough. You'll always be chasing someone else's standard instead of building your own. But in private, comparison dies. You're not measuring yourself against anyone else's journey. You're just showing up, doing the work, honoring the commitment. And that simplicity is liberating.
It removes the noise and returns you to what matters. Are you doing what you said you'd do? Are you moving toward your goal? Are you becoming who you need to be to achieve what you want? Yes or no? No one else's performance affects the answer to those questions. Only yours does. Now let's talk about the relationship between private discipline and public wins. They're not separate. They're sequential. You can't have sustainable public wins without private discipline. You can fake it for a while, ride a wave of luck or timing or viral attention. But without the discipline underneath, the win is hollow. And it won't repeat, because wins built on discipline compound. Wins built on luck evaporate. Discipline creates systems, luck creates moments. Discipline builds capacity. Luck reveals gaps. Discipline prepares you for the next level. Luck exposes you when you get there unprepared. So if you want wins that last, wins that lead to more wins, you build them on the foundation of private discipline. The kind that doesn't need recognition to continue. The kind that operates whether you're winning or losing. The kind that says, This is who I am, not just what I do when people are watching. That identity, disciplined at the core, is what allows you to handle public wins with grace, to stay grounded when everyone's celebrating, to avoid the pitfalls of success that derail so many, to know that the win isn't what made you. The discipline did. And as long as you maintain the discipline, more wins will come. Here's the final truth about public wins and private discipline. People will celebrate the win. They'll praise your talent, your timing, your luck. Very few will acknowledge the discipline because they didn't see it. And that's okay. You don't need them to see it. You don't need them to know how hard you worked, or how much you sacrificed, or how many times you wanted to quit but didn't. That knowledge is yours. It's the private trophy that no one can take. The internal scoreboard that says, I did what I said I would. I became who I needed to be. I earned this. And that satisfaction, that deep, unshakable knowing, is worth more than any amount of public recognition. Because public recognition fades. The crowd moves on. The next person wins. The next story breaks. But your discipline? That stays. It becomes the bedrock of your character. The proof that you're someone who can be trusted by yourself and others. The foundation for every future win. So let them celebrate the public wins. You celebrate the private discipline. The choice you made this morning. The standard you held yesterday. The commitment you've honored for weeks, months, years. That's the real victory. Not the moment everyone sees, but the 1,000 moments no one did. And when the next goal calls, when the next level appears, when the next impossible thing demands your focus, you won't need to wonder if you can do it, because you've already proven it to yourself, in private, where it counts.
Chapter 14. The Sovereign Path. You've come to the end of a journey that most people never begin. Not because they can't, but because they're unwilling to walk the path that led you here. The path of silence, of restraint, of building in the dark while everyone else performs in the light. This is the sovereign path. And sovereignty isn't given, it's claimed. Not through declaration, through demonstration. You've demonstrated it by choosing focus over validation, by protecting your vision when the world demanded you share it, by proving to yourself that you can commit to something in silence and see it through to completion. That proof has transformed you. You're not the same person who started this journey. You've shed the need for permission, the craving for applause, the dependency on external validation to know if you're on the right track. You've become sovereign, self-governing, self-sustaining, self-assured. Not because you're perfect, but because you're proven. And that changes everything. Let's talk about what sovereignty actually means. It means you've internalized your authority. You no longer look outside yourself for confirmation that your choices are valid. You don't poll your friends before you make a move. You don't need consensus to take a risk. You don't require someone else's belief to pursue your vision. You've become the ultimate authority on your own life. Not arrogantly, not recklessly, but with the quiet confidence that comes from having built something real while everyone else was still talking. Sovereignty means you've broken free from the validation economy. You no longer trade your focus for likes, your momentum for recognition, your progress for performance. You've discovered that the most valuable currency isn't attention, it's completion. And completion doesn't require an audience. It requires commitment, consistency, the willingness to show up when no one's watching and do the work anyway. You've mastered that.
And in mastering it, you've accessed a kind of freedom that most people will never experience. The freedom to move at your own pace, to pivot without explanation, to fail in private and learn without judgment, to build something exactly as you see it, uncompromised by committee or crowd. That freedom is sovereignty, and it's the most valuable thing you've gained from this journey. More valuable than the result itself, because results come and go. But sovereignty, once claimed, is permanent. It's a way of being that you carry into every future endeavor, a standard you've set for how you engage with your goals, your work, your life. And that standard is this: I don't need you to see it to know it's real. I don't need you to understand it to know it's right. I don't need you to celebrate it to know it's valuable. I am the authority, and I answer to the vision, not the crowd. That's the sovereign path. And once you've walked it, you can never go back. Here's what happens next. You take what you've learned and you apply it again to the next goal, the next level, the impossible thing. But this time, it's different. This time, you don't announce. You don't seek validation. You don't make it public until it's undeniable. This time, you move with the confidence of someone who's already proven they can build in silence. And because you've done it once, you know you can do it again. Better, faster, deeper. Because you've eliminated the friction that slows most people down. The need to explain, to justify, to perform. You just build. And building without interference creates exponential results. The first win took months. The next will take weeks. The first required faith. The next requires only memory. The first was uncertain. The next is inevitable. Because you've installed the system, the discipline, the mindset. And systems don't fail. They just run. So you run. Not for applause, for achievement. Not for recognition, for results. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to discover what you're capable of when you fully commit. And the answer to that question will surprise you. Because you're more capable than you think, more resilient, more creative, more powerful. You just needed the silence to discover it, the space to become it, the discipline to prove it. And now that you have, there's no limit to what you can build. Let me tell you what separates you from the crowd now. The crowd is still announcing, still seeking permission through sharing, still trading focus for validation, still explaining what they're going to do instead of doing it. But you're done with that game. You've seen through it. You understand that announcement is a trap, that visibility without substance is just noise, that the real power lies not in being seen, but in becoming undeniable. And undeniable is what you are now. Not because you've marketed yourself into relevance, but because you've built something real, something that stands on its own merit, something that doesn't need hype because it delivers value. That's the mark of sovereignty. And the world responds to it, not with casual interest, with respect. Because respect isn't given to announcers, it's given to finishers, to people who do what they say they'll do, to people who show up with results instead of excuses, to people who've mastered the art of silence and wielded it as strategy. You're one of those people now. And that identity will open doors that announcement never could. Here's your challenge moving forward. Protect the path. Don't let success make you sloppy. Don't let one win convince you that you can skip the silence next time. Don't let the applause seduce you into announcing early. The sovereign path is not a one-time strategy. It's a way of life. It's how you approach every goal, every dream, every vision that calls you forward. With silence, with focus,
with the unshakable commitment to build first and reveal second. That discipline, maintained over years, is what separates legends from one-hit wonders, masters from amateurs, sovereigns from subjects. And you have the choice every single day to walk the sovereign path, to resist the urge to announce, to honor the work by protecting it, to trust the process even when it feels invisible. Make that choice again and again, and watch what you become. Not just successful, sovereign. Not just accomplished, autonomous. Not just recognized, respected. Because you've earned it the hard way, the silent way, the only way that lasts. Now think back to where you started, to the moment you first felt the pull of this message, when you realized that maybe, just maybe, the reason your goals kept dying was because you kept exposing them too soon. You were right. And the proof isn't in this book. It's in what you've built since you started reading it, in the goal you've been protecting, in the work you've been doing in silence, in the discipline you've been practicing when no one's watching. That's the proof. And if you've honored the path, if you've truly stayed silent and focused, you're close now. Close to the moment when you get to unveil, when you get to show the world what you've been building, when you get to experience the power of a result that no one saw coming. That moment is coming. And when it arrives, remember this. The applause is temporary. The discipline is permanent. The recognition is nice. The sovereignty is essential. The win is public, but the victory was always private. You won the moment you chose silence over announcement, focus over validation, commitment over comfort. Everything after that is just the world catching up to what you already knew. You're someone who finishes, someone who builds, someone who doesn't need to tell people what they do, because their life, their results, their transformation, their undeniable presence tells the story better than words ever could. That's sovereignty. And it's yours. Not because you read about it, but because you lived it. In silence. In focus. In the dark, grinding, unglamorous work that transforms potential into proof. You did the work. Now go show them what it built. Not with words, with presence. Not with explanation, with results. Not with announcement, with arrival. And when they ask how you did it, and they will, just smile, because you know the secret they're not ready to hear. The secret that changed everything for you. The secret that separated you from the crowd and set you on the sovereign path. The secret is simple. You never told them what you were doing. You focused in silence, and you won in public. Now it's your turn to decide. Will you return to the announcement trap, or will you walk the sovereign path for the rest of your life? The choice is yours, but you already know the answer. Because once you've tasted sovereignty, submission is impossible. Once you've built in silence, noise is unbearable. Once you've proven you can finish without an audience, you'll never need one again. You're sovereign now, forever. And the world is about to find out what that means.
Closing. You're standing at a threshold now. Behind you, every goal you announced too early, every dream that died in daylight, every moment you traded focus for validation and wondered why the momentum disappeared. Ahead of you, a different way, the sovereign path, the way of silence, focus, and undeniable results. You can't walk both paths. You have to choose. And the choice isn't made once. It's made every single day. Every time you feel the urge to post about what you're building. Every time you want to tell someone your plans. Every time the silence feels heavy and you crave the relief of announcement, that's when you choose. And the choice is always the same. Protect the work, honor the silence, trust the process. Because you now know what most people will never understand. The world doesn't reward announcers. It rewards finishers. Your words mean nothing until your results speak first. And the fastest path to those results is the one walked in silence. So here's what you do next. Close this book, open your life, and build something in the dark that will shock them in the light. Don't announce it. Don't document it. Don't explain it. Just do it. Day after day, hour after hour, choice after choice. When no one's watching, when no one cares, when no one would know if you quit, that's where you prove it. Not to them, to yourself, that you are someone who finishes, someone who honors their commitments, someone who doesn't need permission, validation, or applause to do what needs to be done. And when the work is complete, when you've built something undeniable, something real, something that can't be ignored, then you speak. Not with words, with presence, with results, with the quiet power of someone who stayed silent while everyone else was shouting. They'll ask how you did it, and you'll know the answer. I never told you what I was doing. I focused in silence, and I won in public. That's the formula. That's the path. That's the secret that isn't really a secret. It's just a discipline that most people are unwilling to practice. But you're not most people. You're the one who made it to the end, who absorbed the message, who's ready to live it. So go. Disappear into your work. Vanish into your vision. Build in the dark. And when you emerge, transformed, accomplished, sovereign, the world won't just notice, they'll never forget. Because you'll be living proof that the most powerful way to announce yourself is to never announce yourself at all. Focus in silence, win in public, live sovereign. This is your path now. Walk it well.